Alpha One Drop Zone presents Honoring Our Veterans, a series of interviewing our military veterans. Our purpose is to reconnect our country with our veterans and our history.
My name is Steve Gonzalez, Vice President of Marketing and Community Relations with Alpha One Drop Zone. Today we're honored to have another World War II veteran with us. His name is Frank Foulkes. Frank was a Navy corpsman. He was also stationed at Guadalcanal. He was on the first ship that battled the Japanese in August of '42. Frank, thank you for your service, first of all.
It's a pleasure.
You know, let's go back to when you joined the military, and I think you told me you were 21 years old at that time.
I was 21 years old. I tried to get in the Navy when I was 17, and neither one of my parents would sign for me. So I lived in Philadelphia at the time. I was born and raised in Philadelphia. So I went to New York and I tried to enlist, and I told the recruiting sergeant that I was 21 years old, and he said, sure. So he sent me home with a whole bunch of papers, which neither one of my parents would sign. So I had to wait until I was 21, and then I could sign for myself. So I was recruited into the Navy in July of 1940.
Okay, Frank, everyone remembers Pearl Harbor. Can you tell us about your first memory of Pearl Harbor?
Well, I was on board the USS Hunter Liggett, and we were anchored off Hampton Roads, Virginia, which is the Norfolk Naval Station. And we were ordered early in the morning on Sunday morning, December the 7th, we were ordered out to sea. Half our crew was ashore for Liberty for the weekend, but we had half a crew, and when all the ships that were in Hampton Roads that were capable of moving were ordered out of Hampton Roads. And they were dispersed at sea because we didn't know what was happening. We weren't told what was happening. We were just told to get underway. So we did, and we were gone for a couple of days, and then they brought us back in again, and then we found out that Pearl Harbor had been attacked by the Japanese. And that's when we first knew that Pearl Harbor had been attacked.
So your first battle on the ship, was that at Guadalcanal? Was it the Battle of Guadalcanal?
Yeah, after Pearl Harbor, we trained troops on the East Coast. We trained Marines to go in. We went to Onslow Beach, North Carolina, and we trained the troops, the Marines, go ashore in the Higgins boats, attack the beach, take them back in the evening. Next day we do it all over again. And we were training the troops, the Marine troops, for the invasion of the islands in the Pacific. And so in April of 1942, we left New York, went through the canal, and ended up in Wellington, New Zealand. And in August of 1942, I think it was August the 9th, 1942, we made the first attack on Guadalcanal. Took the 1st Marine Division into Guadalcanal.
You were on a attack transport ship. Who was on the ship, your personnel? Was it made up of officers or?
Well, we had a Coast Guard crew. In I'm not sure what, 1941, 1942. But anyway, they had the Lend-Lease program, and they loaned England a number of Coast Guard ships. And so they had a number of Coast Guard people available for assignment. And in wartime, the Navy took over the Coast Guard. And so we ended up with a Coast Guard crew, but the Coast Guard didn't have medical people. And so they had Navy, so it was a combination of both Navy and Coast Guard on board. But we had the commanding officer and most of the officers and crew, active crew, were Coast Guard. The pharmacist mates, the yeomen were Navy, and maybe a few other odds and ends of Navy, but most of them were Coast Guard.
So you were a corpsman, Navy corpsman with the Navy. Of course, that name has changed to a hospital corpsman now, but can you tell us about some of your duties, what you did, of course, during the war?
Well, my first assignment when I got in the Navy was the Naval Hospital in Philadelphia. And then I was transferred from there to New York, Brooklyn Navy Yard, and we put the Hunter Liggett into commission. The Hunter Liggett was originally an Army transport, and the Navy took it over and converted it to an attack transport, put the guns on board. Originally, the Army did not have any armament on board because it was a former ocean liner that was converted to the Army. And then the Navy took it over and converted it, put the armament on board, and we put it in commission in 1941. In July of 1941, it was commissioned. It was named after the Hunter Liggett. Hunter Liggett was an Army general, and so the ship was named after an Army general. And they just retained the name and made it the USS Hunter Liggett, the APA-14. APA meaning attack personnel assault.
We talked about Guadalcanal, the battles and different places, where you had were in combat. What were some of the other different type of battles that you experienced in that area?
Well, most of the battles were the assault of the islands of Guadalcanal, Tulagi, Bougainville, and actually we were damaged at Bougainville, and so we were sent back to the States at that time. But what we did was we took the troops and landed them on the islands, and then we would evacuate the casualties. We'd take the casualties back to the different base hospitals. There was a base hospital in Espiritu Santos, and there was one in New Caledonia, and there was one in New Zealand, in Auckland, New Zealand, and in Wellington, New Zealand. And so we would take the casualties back, and then we would pick up fresh troops and take them back. We made, altogether, I think we made about 15 attacks on the islands where we either took the original people in or reinforced the island after we took it over. We took troops in that built Henderson Field, for instance. We supplied the Army with, actually with the Army Air Corps at that time. That was before we had the Air Force.
Right.
It was still the Army Air Force. And we took supplies in that helped to build Henderson Field there on Guadalcanal. But our main assignment was to make the attack and then relieve the casualties.
What's your most what's the greatest memory you have of World War II, Frank?
It's not pleasant. It's when the Battle of Sable Island was a night battle, and the Japanese attacked us. And in that battle, we lost the Quincy, the Astoria, the Vincennes, and a Navy, Australian Navy ship the Canberra. I think it was a light cruiser. And they always sunk, and the crews were, if they could abandon ship, were in the ocean. And our destroyers were picking up the casualties out of the ocean and bringing them over to us. And we ended up with about 600 and some casualties on board that we had to take care of and get them back to. And so we practically turned our whole ship into a hospital ship to take care of those 600 casualties for the trip. And I can't remember whether we went to Espiritu Santos or to New Caledonia. But we had to take the casualties. And in that battle, some of the casualties that we took passed away. And
Well, Frank,
very good to see.
yeah. Trumpet, you know, God bless you with that. And I've heard you play before. You played at one of our functions, that Alpha One Drop Zone, at memorial service. You played taps like
Amazing Grace.
Amazing Grace, also awesome. So maybe before today, you might be able to play something for us. Is that possible?
Yeah, we can go in the other room.
Okay.
Shirley's going to play with me. She plays the piano.
Well, good. That'll be nice. Once the war ended, and you came back to the States, how did that affect you, the war, when you came back, Frank?
Within a week, I went back to work.
Wow.
I walked back into I worked for Armstrong Car Company before I went into the Navy. And so when I come out of the Navy, I knew I wanted to take advantage of the GI Bill, but I didn't know exactly what and where I would be going. So I went back to work. I just walked into my old shop and said, here I am. And they said, okay, when do you want to come back? And I said, well, how about next week? And they said, okay. So I took a week off and then I went back to work. And I worked for a couple months, and during that couple months I investigated some colleges, and I thought I might like to stay in the medical field, but none of the colleges at that time had, unless I tried to become a doctor, which I didn't have the qualifications for. And so I could qualify for engineering school because my high school credits qualified me for engineering school, but not for medical school. So I went to the Philadelphia University. It's now Philadelphia University, and got a degree in textile engineering and design. But I never worked at it. After I graduated, I ended up in personnel and labor relations, and I stayed in personnel and labor relations for the rest of my career, and ended up with Interstate Bakeries Corporation as corporate director of personnel. Now they call it human resources.
Right.
In my day, it was personnel.
Right, I remember too.
Yeah.
Well, Frank, it's always a pleasure to visit with you. I remember the first time we met, first time we had lunch together here at your residence, and I just want to tell you, we can never thank you enough for what you did and all World War II veterans. So, God bless you, and we'll take a break, and then we'll go ahead and have you play a song for us on the trumpet. Is that okay?
That's okay.
Okay, thank you, Frank. We're in for a treat this morning. We have Frank Foulkes with us again, and he is going to play America the Beautiful. Before you start, Frank, I just want to share, if you don't mind, your age. Frank is 97 years old. He will be 98 March 11th. Is that right, March 11th?
March 11th.
So before you start, I want to thank you, Shirley, for being here today, and also playing with Frank. So let's go ahead and start, Frank, whenever you're ready. Thank you, Frank. Thank you, Shirley. Well, I guess the only thing to say to finish would be God bless America. And thank you again, Frank. God bless you.
We could do that.
No, you'd have to.
We're going to have an encore presentation here by Frank. He's going to play us one more song. It's God Bless America.